Hello, guys. Welcome to this new episode of the Unexplainable podcast. The Bible, the book that has profoundly influenced the history of humanity, is certainly one of the most read, studied, and revered texts of all time. With over 2 billion believers around the world who consider it sacred, this ancient scripture is not only a pillar of faith, but also a source of solved mysteries, historical enigmas and theories that fascinate anyone who delves into its pages. Despite its religious nature, the Bible also has an enigma to decipher. Who are some of the figures that appear in it really? How do you explain the extraordinary events it tells? And above all, why do we still continue to be pervaded by the feeling that there are many secrets hidden among its pages? So here are the 5 most surprising mysteries and disturbing mysteries of the Bible. Hello, guys, and welcome to this new episode of the Unexplainable podcast. The Bible, a book that has greatly influenced human history, is one of the most read and studied texts. And the translation of Shakespeare. Let's begin with what might be the least disturbing mystery among those I'll present in this episode, but that has nonetheless represented a puzzle for numerous scholars around the world. Who doesn't know William Shakespeare? His immortal works have spanned the centuries, fascinating and inspiring numerous generations. But what would you think if I told you that among his possible works there could be one never officially attributed? A work far from the stage, but very close to spirituality. That is, the translation of the Book of Psalms in the King James Bible of 1611. According to the thesis, Shakespeare would have been the official translator of the text, although he decided to hide this fundamental contribution from the world. A fascinating and controversial theory, which arises from an observation as simple as it is intriguing. The King James Bible is considered one of the most influential translations of Scripture, characterized by elegant and poetic language. In particular, the Psalms strike for their musicality and extraordinary evocative power, characteristics that recall the poetic mastery of Shakespeare. The idea that the playwright contributed to this translation, it's not just an abstract hypothesis, but it's based on some alleged evidence that has fueled the debate among scholars and enthusiasts. First of all, it should be said that Shakespeare, although known primarily as a playwright and poet, lived in an era deeply marked by the Christian religion and the Anglican monarchy. His works contain numerous biblical references, a sign of a deep knowledge of the Holy Scriptures. Some scholars hypothesize that his cultural background also included knowledge of Greek and Hebrew, fundamental languages for the translation of that text. Who would have made him an ideal candidate to participate in a project of such magnitude? Secondly, Shakespeare was well integrated into the cultural and intellectual circles of the time. Among his contacts were prominent figures directly involved in the Bible translation project. King James I, a great patron of the arts and literature himself, personally oversaw the work. Given the prestige, the literary talent of the writer, it would not be entirely unlikely that he would have requested his contribution. But there is an even more surprising detail that has fueled this hypothesis, more precisely what we could define as a hidden numerical game in Psalm number 46. If you take the King James Bible, in fact, and examine the 46th Psalm, you will notice that the 46th word from the beginning is shake, and the 46th word from the end is spear. Shakespeare. A coincidence? Well, someone might consider it such, but there's more. In 1610, the year of the alleged revision of the translation, Shakespeare was exactly 46 years old. Is it really possible that the precise placement of those 2 words that together form the author's name is a coincidence, or is it a hidden clue? An undeniable secret signature of the poet within the text? Either way, there is a lot of skepticism about this hypothesis. The main objection is the total lack of documentary evidence to support it. There are no writings, letters, or direct testimonies linking Shakespeare to the translation of the Bible. Moreover, the work on the King James Version was a collective endeavor with theologians, linguists, and biblical scholars engaged for years in its realization. The idea that a single author could have left such a marked imprint seems implausible. Another criticism concerns the linguistic style. The King James Bible translation and Shakespearean language share certain poetic features, but this could be due to the historical period rather than a direct involvement of the author. Elizabethan English was rich in metaphors, parallelisms, and elegant constructions, elements that could emerge naturally, even without the intervention of a poet like Shakespeare. In short, the theory of his involvement in the translation of the Book of Psalms remains a solved mystery. Perhaps one day new documents will emerge capable of confirming or denying this rumor once and for all. Until then, it will remain one of the many enigmas that surround the figure of the bard, another shadow of the intricate labyrinth of his legacy. The 5 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I'm sure the title of this part of the episode left you puzzled. 5 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, weren't there 4? Officially, yes. However, there is an intriguing theory that could overturn this certainty. In the book of Revelation, John describes a terrifying scenario where 4 horsemen descend upon the world, bringing chaos and destruction. Each of them embodies a scourge that threatens humanity: conquest, war, famine, and death. Their ride is seen as a harbinger of the end times, a signal that the inevitable is now near. But what would happen if there was a 5th rider, a figure hidden within the folds of biblical tradition, a powerful and forgotten entity who may have played a crucial role in the fate of humanity without ever being officially recognized? This hypothesis, debated by scholars passionate about esotericism, has gained more and more ground in recent years. Some suggest that this figure could be Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, known as Pluto in Roman mythology. But why would such an entity have been omitted or unrecognized in biblical texts? To grasp this, we must proceed systematically. The vision of the 4 horsemen is found in the book of Revelation of John chapter 6, where it is described upon the opening of the seals of the book that only the Lamb, symbolically Jesus Christ, is able to break. With each broken seal, a horseman emerges. The white horseman rides a pure white steed and is interpreted as the personification of conquest or victory, although some associate it with the triumphant Christ or even the Antichrist. The red rider on his blood-colored horse embodies war and violence among nations. The black rider rides a dark horse that represents famine, bringing with him misery and economic injustice. And then the pale rider rides a steed of an indefinite color, between green and yellowish. He is the symbol of death. But he is not alone. He is followed by an entity named in the original text Hades, and it is here that the dilemma arises. The word Hades in this context refers to an abstract concept, the afterlife, or represents a concrete entity. If it were simply a place or a state of the soul, then nothing would change in the traditional narrative. But if Hades were an autonomous entity, then we would have to reconsider everything. We would be facing a 5th rider whose existence could shed new light on one of the most enigmatic texts of the Bible. In Greek mythology, Hades is the lord of the realm of the dead, the ruler of the invisible, the one who governs souls in the afterlife. If it were an entity distinct from death, it could represent the final judgment, the ultimate destination of the soul, or even the ultimate entropy of human existence. But how could a pagan concept infiltrate a Christian sacred text? However, there is another detail that could support this theory. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 14, it reads that death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire, symbol of the final destruction. This passage seems to suggest that Hades is an autonomous force, distinct from death itself, and therefore deserving of its own identity in the apocalyptic narrative. What could be the true purpose of the 5th horseman, assuming it exists? It could be the guardian of souls, the one who decrees the ultimate fate of humanity after the first four horsemen have carried out their destructive work. Or it could represent an even darker truth hidden between the lines of the apocalypse. It should be said that there is no definitive evidence to support this theory. However, if the fifth horseman really did exist, his presence would radically change our understanding of the biblical text, adding new paths of complexity and obscurity to one of the greatest questions in human history. The mystery of Enoch. What I'm about to talk about is one of the most unfathomable enigmas of the Bible, a story that challenges our understanding, shrouded in mystery and speculation. Its protagonist is Enoch, an enigmatic character who, according to the book of Genesis, walked with God for over 3 centuries on earth before being taken by him and led to heaven without experiencing physical death. But why? What secret lies behind this extraordinary descent? And in what implications does this episode have in the heart of the scriptures? Let's see it together. The passage that tells the story of the character is short, but full of meaning. In chapter 5 of Genesis, it is written that Enoch lived 365 years, a number that, although it may seem random, is deeply symbolic. 365 are the days of a solar year, a complete cycle. His life, therefore, could have been seen as perfect, harmonious, in total balance with the divine. There is no clear explanation as to why God decided to spare him from death, but the sacred text suggests that Enoch was particularly pleasing in the eyes of the Creator. A righteous man, pure, an example of absolute devotion. But the most enigmatic detail lies in the formula with which his fate is described. Enoch walked with God and then disappeared. An abduction, a physical transport, a transfiguration, or something even more extraordinary? The mystery deepens as we approach the book of Enoch, an apocryphal text excluded from the biblical canon, but which had a profound influence in the early centuries of Christianity. This ancient writing tells that Enoch was taken to the heavens, where he met angels and learned divine secrets. Among these secrets were cosmological revelations, forbidden knowledge transmitted by fallen angels, and understanding of future events. The book describes Enoch as a mediator between God and humanity, a witness to hidden truths, and a judge of rebellious souls. The character chosen to see what no other man could have contemplated: the celestial spheres, the dwelling of God, the fate of humanity, a mission as grand as it is dangerous, which made him a unique figure in biblical tradition. Despite his exclusion from the official Bible, the book of Enoch profoundly influenced early Christian theology. Some considered him a precursor to Christ, a symbol of transfiguration and the promise of salvation for the righteous. Others saw him as a being who transcended the human condition by reaching a higher awareness. According to certain esoteric traditions, his ascension would represent a process of enlightenment, a transition to a higher level of consciousness, similar to what some Eastern philosophies call spiritual awakening. But there's another theory, decidedly more disturbing. Some modern theorists suggest that Enoch was not simply a righteous man, but the first witness of an encounter with extraterrestrial intelligences. According to this hypothesis, his journey into the heavens and contact with beings of light could be interpreted as an ancient alien abduction experience. The angels described in the book of Enoch could actually be creatures from other worlds, bearers of advanced knowledge and technology so extraordinary as to seem divine. In the eyes of an ancient man, this theory ties back to the idea of the ancient astronauts, according to which many biblical and mythological figures would have had contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Enoch, therefore, could have been chosen as a messenger to receive forbidden knowledge, destined to be passed down through the centuries. Whatever the truth, this mystery remains one of the most fascinating in the Bible. Enoch was a prophet, an enlightened one, a chosen one by the gods, or the first man to witness an encounter with alien civilizations. The tough verdict is up to you. Hell, when we think of hell, our mind immediately conjures up the image of a place of eternal torment, enveloped by burning flames and unspeakable sufferings. A concept rooted for centuries in the collective imagination, fueled by works of art, preachings, and folkloric tales. According to the most widespread Christian tradition, hell would be the final destination of those who have lived a life marked by sin. However, delving into the biblical text, we discover that the vision of hell, as we know it today, is the result of a theological and cultural evolution, rather than a univocal description present in the Holy Scriptures. In fact, the Bible never directly mentions a hell as a place of eternal torment for sinners. On the contrary, we find several terms, each with a distinct meaning, that have been reinterpreted over the centuries. In the Old Testament, the main term used to indicate the fate of the deceased is Sheol, a concept quite different from that of the Christian hell. The Hebrew word Sheol does not imply suffering or punishment, but rather describes a realm of shadows, a quiet and lifeless place where both the righteous and the wicked rest indistinctly after death. So it is not a dwelling of pain, but a kind of post-mortem existence, devoid of consciousness, similar to the concept of a neutral beyond that we find in many other ancient cultures. In the New Testament, one of the terms translated as hell is Gehenna, which has a particular history. Gehenna was a valley south of Jerusalem that in ancient times had been the site of pagan human sacrifices. Later, it became a dump where waste and animal carcasses were burned, with perpetually lit flames and an unbearable smell. This image of eternal destruction was used by Jesus as a metaphor for the fate of the wicked. But it's important to note that his words do not necessarily imply eternal torment, but rather definitive destruction. Another term used in the sacred text is Hades. In Greek mythology, it was the kingdom of the dead ruled by the god of the same name, and included both places of punishment and peace, like the Elysian fields for virtuous souls. Therefore, this term carries a broader and more nuanced view than the concept of Christian hell. Finally, the New Testament mentions Tartarus only once to indicate the place where the rebellious angels would have been confined. The reference recalls Greek mythology, where Tartarus was a dark and abyssal prison, reserved for defeated deities like the Titans. In short, what emerges from this analysis is the idea of hell as a realm of eternal torment, dominated by unquenchable flames and demons thirsty for souls. It's not a direct biblical description, but the result of centuries of interpretations, cultural influences, and theological developments. Medieval authors like Dante Alighieri, with his Divine Comedy and patristic-era theological thought, have helped to solidify an image of hell that has become the dominant paradigm of Western culture. So, whether you believe it or not, one thing is certain. Hell, as we've always conceived it in the Bible, does not exist, and it never has. The number of the beast. And to conclude this roundup of biblical enigmas, the most disturbing of all could certainly not be missing. A number full of meaning and terror. I am obviously talking about 666, a symbol that for centuries has aroused fear, speculation, and controversial interpretations. What does it really represent? Why has it become the number par excellence of evil, inextricably linked to Satan? The answer lies in the Holy Scriptures. In chapter 13 of the Apocalypse, we read the following. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So it is the Bible itself that suggests its symbolism to us. Yet within this number hides a meaning that I am sure you will be surprised. One of the most accredited theories is that 666 is actually a coded number to indicate Emperor Nero, one of the cruelest persecutors of Christians. This hypothesis is based on gematria, an ancient Jewish practice that assigns numerical values to the letters of the alphabet. If the name is Nero Caesar, it is transcribed in Hebrew, and its numerical values are added up. The result is indeed 666. This suggests that the author of the Apocalypse, living in a time of fierce oppression for Christians, used this number to identify their persecutor without risking direct reprisals. But there's more. Some scholars believe that 666 was not only referring to Nero, but was a symbol of every oppressive regime, a warning against tyrants and corrupt governments, a number destined to embody absolute and ruthless authority. But what led it to this unequivocal association with evil? There is an explanation for this as well. In biblical symbolism, the number 6 represents imperfection and materiality, while 7 is the number of divine perfection. God created the world in 7 days. 6 is considered incomplete, unable to reach the totality of God. Repeated 3 times, it could therefore represent the pinnacle of imperfection, a sort of satanic parody of the divine Trinity. This is the reason why over time it has been associated with demonic possessions, esoteric cults, and even conspiracy theories related to secret organizations. Besides biblical interpretations, the number 666 has also intrigued numerology scholars who have studied it from a more mystical perspective. According to some theories, it would not necessarily represent absolute evil, but rather a distorted balance, a kind of perfect imperfection. In fact, in numerology, the number 6 is often associated with harmony, balance, and beauty, but also with a purely material dimension. Repeating it 3 times could therefore indicate a world dominated by matter, devoid of spirit and divine transcendence. Be that as it may, one thing is certain. The 666 continues to exert a disturbing fascination. Every time it appears, its symbolic weight triggers fears, interpretations, and debates. Is it just a number, an ancient political critique, a mark of Satan, or perhaps a coded message that we have not yet fully deciphered? We have also reached the end of this episode dedicated to the most disturbing mysteries of the Bible, or the most surprising ones, enigmas that remind us how deep and unfathomable this sacred text is. On one hand, a pillar of faith for millions of people. On the other, an enigma that challenges our understanding. But what do you think? Which of these mysteries about the Bible struck you the most? Let me know in a comment. If you like this episode, leave a like, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, follow it on your favorite podcast platform, or share it with your friends. Goodbye and see you at the next appointment with the Unexplainable. Thanks to everyone